You lost an hour this morning to somebody who does not know you exist. A headline, a comment under your photo, a colleague's tone. Something outside you moved, and your whole inner weather changed with it, and stayed changed. 1900 years ago, a lame ex-slave named Epictetus left a handbook about exactly that, the Enchiridion, and its claim is not that you should feel better about the headline. Its claim is that the headline caused none of it. Every hour of misery you have ever lived came from one repeated, correctable mistake, confusing what is yours with what is not. Almost nothing is yours. Not your body, not your reputation, not your job, not the election, not what anyone in the world thinks of you at this second. What is yours is a strangely short list. Your judgments, your desires, what you move toward and what you turn away from. And his scandalous promise is that this tiny territory, properly held, is enough. Enough for calm, enough for freedom in the hard sense of the word, held by a man who had legally been another man's property. If you have ever read Marcus Aurelius and felt something clean and pitiless running underneath the emperor's melancholy, this is where it came from. Marcus was the student, this crippled ex-slave teaching in a dusty provincial schoolroom was the teacher he never met. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to hand you the one idea the entire handbook is built on. A single distinction, sharp as a blade, and you will be able to use it before lunch.
So who was he?
Epictetus was born a slave around the middle of the 1st century in Hierapolis in Phrygia, in what is now Turkey, and he was carried to Rome as property. His owner was Epictetus, a freedman of the Emperor Nero, which means the man who would teach the Roman world about freedom spent his youth inside the household of the most notorious tyrant in Roman memory. He was lame. One old story says his master broke his leg by torturing him. The commentator Simplicius says more soberly that he was weak in body and lame from an early age. Either way, the philosopher who insisted your body is not really yours lived in a body that had already failed him. Somehow the slave was allowed to attend the lectures of the Stoic Musonius Rufus. Somehow he was freed. He began to teach in Rome, and then in the year 89, the Emperor Domitian expelled the philosophers from the city, and Epictetus walked away from the capital to Nicopolis, a provincial town on the Greek coast, and opened a school in a plain stone room. And here is the part that should stop you. He never wrote a book. Not one word. Everything we have was taken down by a student called Arrian, who transcribed the lectures the way you take notes in a class you cannot afford to forget. The Enchiridion is the little handbook Arrian distilled out of them, which is why it still reads like a voice in the room rather than a treatise on a shelf. And that voice traveled. A century later, the most powerful human being alive, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, sat in a war tent writing his private meditations and quoting this ex-slave more than any other teacher. The meditations are the sequel. This is the source. Here is the whole handbook in one sentence. Some things are in your power, and almost nothing else is. And every disturbance you have ever suffered came from treating what is not yours as if it were. That is it. That is the dichotomy of control, and Epictetus is so completely committed to it that he puts it in the very first line of the book, and then spends the entire rest of the handbook doing nothing but applying it, case after case, to a life. He is not offering you a philosophy of everything. He is handing you one blade and teaching you to cut with it. And notice that this is not a comforting idea, it is a demanding one. The list of things not in your power includes your health, your money, your reputation, whether you are loved, whether your work succeeds, whether your country goes the way you hope. He is not being cruel, he is being exact, and the exactness is the entire medicine. We will walk it in 5 beats. First, the dichotomy itself, the 2 lists, and why almost everything you defend belongs on the wrong one. Second, that nothing which happens to you is disturbing until you judge it so. Third, what to do with a world that flatly refuses to obey you. Fourth, why nothing that can be done to your body can reach the one thing you actually own. And fifth, the role you are handed without being asked, and the only part of it that is yours to decide. 5 beats, 1 distinction, and a man who had every excuse in history to be a victim and refused the excuse.
First beat.
The dichotomy of control. The handbook opens with a sentence that does all the work. Of things, some are in our power and others are not. That is the first line, and every page after it is a footnote. In our power, he says, our opinion, movement towards a thing, desire, aversion, turning from a thing, and in a word, whatever are our acts. Not in our power are the body, property, reputation, offices, and in a word, whatever are not our own acts. Then comes the reason it matters. And the things in our power are by nature free, not subject to restraint or hindrance, but the things not in our power are weak, slavish, subject to restraint, in the power of others. Read that as a warning label. Anything you have built your peace on that sits in the second column, you have handed to somebody else, and they can take it back whenever they feel like it. Make the list yourself right now. What is actually yours? Not your body, it can be broken by a virus or a stranger's car. Not your reputation, it lives inside other people's heads. Not your job, your money, your family's safety, or the outcome of anything you care about. What is left is embarrassingly small. What you judge, what you want, what you move toward, what you refuse. That is the entire estate. And here is the sting. Count how much of your day you spend defending land you do not own, refreshing the result, rehearsing an argument with someone who is not in the room, waiting for a number to move on a screen. The line to carry, if it can be taken from you, it was never the thing holding you up.
Second beat.
The thing is not the problem. Chapter 5 of the handbook is a few lines long, and it quietly dismantles most of what you believe about your own bad days. Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. And he immediately reaches for the hardest test case available, not a spilled cup of wine, but the end of everything. Death is nothing terrible, for if it were, it would have seemed so to Socrates. For the opinion about death that it is terrible is the terrible thing. Look at the shape of that argument, because it is not wishful thinking, it is evidence. If the distress lived inside the event, then the distress would be identical in every person the event happened to, and it never is. The layoff that destroys one person launches another. The rain that ruins your afternoon saves a farmer's year. The silence from a friend that you read as contempt, someone else reads as a busy week. Between the event and your suffering, there is always a step, and the step is yours, and it is so fast you have never once caught yourself taking it. Then Epictetus draws the conclusion with no softness at all. When then we are impeded or disturbed or grieved, he says, let us never blame others but ourselves, that is, our opinions. And then he grades you. It is the act of an ill-instructed man to blame others for his own bad condition. It is the act of one who has begun to be instructed to lay the blame on himself, and of one whose instruction is completed neither to blame another nor himself. Most of us live permanently in stage 1, prosecuting people who are not in the room. The line to carry: the event is not doing this to you, your verdict on it is. Third beat: stop giving orders to reality. If the first 2 beats are diagnosis, this one is the prescription, and it fits in a single sentence. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. Now this is the line people misread as passivity, so be careful with it. He is not telling you to stop acting. He is a teacher who trained students for public life, for courtrooms, for the miserable business of dealing with emperors. What he is telling you is where your demands are allowed to point. Aim them at your own conduct, which answers to you, and stop aiming them at outcomes which do not. Think about the actual texture of a frustrated day. The traffic did not agree to move for you. The interview panel did not agree to be impressed. Your teenager did not agree to be reasonable on a Tuesday. Every one of those is a moment where you issued an order to a universe that never signed the contract, and then experienced its refusal as a personal insult. Epictetus is offering you the cheapest upgrade available to a human life. Stop negotiating with what has already happened. And notice the phrase he chose: a tranquil flow of life. Not a fortress, not a victory. A flow. Water does not argue with the rock. It does not stop moving either. It arrives anyway. The line to carry: work like everything depends on you, and want what actually arrives. Fourth beat: what nothing can touch. Now we get to the sentence that only this particular man could have written, because he wrote it in the body we described earlier, the lame one. Disease is an impediment to the body, but not to the will, unless the will itself chooses. And then, quietly, without a flicker of self-pity, lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will. Sit with that for a second. A man who could not walk properly, who had been legally owned by another human being, is calmly telling you that the worst thing that ever happened to him did not touch the part of him that mattered, because it structurally could not. And add this reflection, he says, on the occasion of everything that happens, for you will find it an impediment to something else, but not to yourself. That is the tool. Anything that hits you, ask what exactly it obstructs. The diagnosis obstructs the body. The layoff obstructs the income. The insult obstructs the reputation. The traffic obstructs the schedule. In every case, name the thing it actually blocks, and then notice that it has not reached your judgment, your response, or the kind of person you intend to be in the next 10 minutes, unless you personally hand those over. This is why the Stoics are so often misread as cold. They are not saying it does not hurt. They are saying there is a room inside you that the damage does not have the keys to. The line to carry: name what it actually blocks, and you will find it never reaches you. Fifth beat: the part you were given. Epictetus lived in a world of theatres, and he closes the loop with the image everyone remembers. Remember that thou art an actor in a play, of such a kind as the teacher may choose, if short, of a short one, if long, of a long one. If he wishes you to act the part of a poor man, see that you act the part naturally. If the part of a lame man, of a magistrate, of a private person, do the same. And then the line, for this is your duty, to act well the part that is given to you. but to select the part belongs to another. You did not choose your century, your country, your parents, your face, your body, or the particular set of talents and limits you woke up inside. That is the casting, and the casting is closed. What you have is the performance. And notice how brutally this cuts against the modern religion of self-invention, which tells you that if the role is wrong, you can simply rewrite it, and quietly implies that a hard life is a failure of imagination. Epictetus, who was cast as a lame slave, is telling you something harder and far more useful. The dignity is never in the part, it is entirely in the playing. The nurse on a night shift, the person caring for a parent who no longer recognizes them, the one who got the diagnosis at 34, none of them chose the script. All of them can play it magnificently. The line to carry: you do not get to pick the role, you get to decide how it is played.
So what does all of it add up to?
Strip the 5 beats down, and there is really only one idea in this book, turned over and over like a stone in the hand. Almost nothing is yours. He opens by drawing the line: of things some are in our power and others are not, and the things in our power are by nature free, while everything else is weak, slavish, and in the power of others. He shows you that this is why events cannot actually hurt you, because men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things, and the opinion is on your side of the line. He tells you to stop demanding that reality obey and to want what happens, because the demand itself is the injury. He shows you that no disease, no lameness, no disaster reaches the will unless the will chooses to let it. And he leaves you with the theatre. The casting is not yours, only the performance is. One distinction applied 5 ways. And here is why this ancient handbook keeps outselling almost everything written since. It does not ask the world to improve before you can be well. It does not require a better job, a fairer boss, a kinder internet, or a functioning country. It relocates the entire question inside the only territory you have ever actually governed, and then tells you, without sentimentality, that this territory is small, that it is genuinely yours, and that it is enough. A man born into slavery worked that out. It is difficult to think of a stronger proof of concept. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your day. The next time something knocks you sideways, and it will happen within about 6 hours, stop before you react and ask one question. Is this mine or not mine? Not as a mood, as an audit. The email, the diagnosis, the price, the person's tone, the number on the screen. Not mine. What is mine is the next thing I say, the story I choose to tell about it, and whether I let it run my afternoon. Say it out loud if you can, because saying it out loud is what makes it a practice instead of a nice idea. And then, because Epictetus was ruthlessly practical, start absurdly small. He tells his students to begin with spilled oil and a little stolen wine, not with death and exile, because you do not learn a skill on the hardest case. So practice on the slow cue. Practice on the driver who cut you off, on the reply that has not come, on the weather that ruined the plan. Each one is a repetition, and character is nothing but repetitions. Do this for a week and something strange happens. The gap between what happens and how you take it, the gap you never knew was there, starts to become visible and then usable, and it turns out to be the only room in which a human being was ever actually free. You will not stop things from happening to you. You will stop handing them the keys. Epictetus never wrote a word, never held any power, never owned his own body for the first part of his life, and produced the most practical book on freedom that anyone has ever written. It fits in a pocket. It says one thing: almost nothing is yours, so guard fiercely the little that is, and let the rest be what it is going to be anyway. Marcus Aurelius read it and became the emperor we remember for his calm. You can read it in an afternoon. If this walk through the Enchiridion gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully in about 20 minutes. Next time we stay with mortality, but change the weather completely. Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, the short, devastating novel about a successful man who discovers on his deathbed that he lived his entire life correctly and none of it was his own. And tell me in the comments, name one thing you have been treating as yours that plainly is not, and what changes tomorrow if you finally put it down. I read every reply.